there is I think a fair criticism of the Democrats for not locking this in statutorily.
Yes.
In the chances they've had in the past. But also, people should not forget this history. In 2004, I believe it was, in the run-up to the 2004 election, it may have been after the 2004 election, Hillary Clinton was one of the stronger voices in saying, we need to be a little bit softer on abortion. We need, in fact, I think that's part of the reason why Obama in 2007, when he was running, was adamant about passing this because there was a move in the Democratic Party to sort of soften the edges. I mean, we see, you know, and I'm only picking on Hillary Clinton because she just happened to sort of do the same thing about transgender rights in a piece. It's unclear to me how it was presented. I didn't see her complain about the way that it was written in the Times. Not necessarily your paper, but
the Financial Times.
I was in the Financial Times.
Yeah.
But we see this tendency of Democrats, and that is why, you know, and fair enough. I think, you know, when Obama got into office, he said it's no longer a legislative priority. When he said it was the first thing he was going to do, he didn't know there would be a financial crisis. But nevertheless, the fear of Democrats to sort of push these things that have these type of popularity is, I mean, that we're still stuck in this triangulation mentality with these people.
Yeah, I mean, there's the decision not to try to codify Roe really is baffling. I mean, there's the cynical explanation, right, that, you know, as long as Roe isn't codified, then you have, you know, you can say, hey, people come out and vote, donate, et cetera, et cetera. There might be a vested interest among sort of the various kind of like, you know, politicians and the nonprofit industrial complex and everything around not just doing this legislatively. But at the same time, ostensibly, you know, Roe is the thing that unites the Democratic coalition. I mean, even in 2009, you didn't quite have a filibuster-proof majority in those first few months, but you had a large majority in the House. And the number of Democrats who would have blanched from codifying Roe, which is nationally very popular, I have to imagine is pretty small. So it's mystifying to me why this didn't happen. I mean, there's again a lot of explanations, but it didn't. And it just hasn't been a priority. Part of me thinks that there just was disbelief that the Supreme Court would take this step, or that the Supreme Court even ever be in the position to take this step. I mean, I remember hearing, I remember people are making this argument that, oh, you know, Republicans are never actually going to overturn Roe because it's too good of a thing to get their base all riled up. It's too good of a motivator for their voters. And there seems to have been a sense, a belief that Republicans and conservatives from the court and the conservative legal movement didn't really mean it, but they very clearly meant it.
Yes.
And this is, I mean, this is sort of one of the things I occasionally rant about is just sort of the incredible level of cynicism about politicians to the point that people just do not believe anything they say they're going to do, which is to the benefit of sort of the worst actors in politics. Because if everyone believes that politicians are just always going to lie, then the people, when Donald Trump says I'm going to ban Muslims, and it's like, oh, he doesn't really mean it. And then he does it because he meant it. And like most of the time, even if people are duplicitous politicians, even if they aren't fully honest, most of the time they mean what they say. And we should take that seriously. When a bunch of reactionaries say we want to overturn the right to an abortion, they mean it. Clarence Thomas, in his concurring opinion on Dobbs, said the court should overturn. Griswold v. Connecticut should overturn. Obergefell should overturn. Lawrence v. Texas, right? Like, that isn't idle rhetoric. Like, he means it. And there are lots of people in the Republican Party and in the conservative movement who agree with him. And so the reaction should be not to say, well, you know, you don't got to worry about that stuff. The reaction you should act as if, no, they're going to do it. If they get the opportunity, they're going to do it.
We should say Thomas also oddly left out loving Virginia. But
although I think he'd overrule that too. I don't think that would stop. I don't think his marriage would stop him from doing that.
No, they could still be good friends. It is. I mean, and that dynamic, we should say, reminds me of that story. And for the life of me, I can't remember where there's been focus groups where they have presented like the Republican platform to voters.
Right.
And the voters say like, no, we don't believe that that's what the platform is. Like, it's so outrageous that they do not believe that it's going to happen. And to some extent, like, I feel like we are entering a period of time in our politics where, and it's really just a question of like, does this take 2 years, 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, where, because we're going to get West Virginia and EPA next week, and that is going to be the next step in essentially the destruction of our administrative state. Right. And the ability of our government to regulate stuff. We're not that far out from more salmonella and more E. coli in our food, and I mean, the financial markets being far less regulated, and environment and clean air, clean water. I mean, just on and on and on. And we have multiple generations who have grown up without even the contemplation of this. People in the 60s, they could remember what things were like 30 years before. There was like an institutional memory, and where, 60-hour work week. Sorry, New York. We're not going to, you can't put a cap on how many hours we work our sweatshop folks. That was in the body politic in the 50s and the 60s. And it became just an assumption it's always going to be like that. And I feel like there's a whole mess of people who are about to find out it doesn't always have to be like that.
Right. I mean, the one, I'm sure you can call this silver lining, but the closest thing to a silver lining here is precisely this fact, right? That's sort of like what Americans have grown accustomed to is a government that protects their rights, is a government that does at least something to regulate the pollution in our air and in our water and in our, in our consumer goods. And I think there is an opportunity. It's not going to be automatic, right? It's not going to be an automatic reaction, but there's an opportunity for a political party that wants to take it in these rulings, in making the case that like, this is what the Republican Party wants. Like, at the end of the day, this is what it wants. It wants to essentially unleash the most powerful corporations and the wealthiest people to do whatever they want. It wants to unleash sort of like the worst busybodies you can imagine to control your life, to control who you can marry and whether you can end your pregnancy and all sorts of things. And it wants to restrict your right to vote, so they keep you from doing something about it. So let's like collectively stop these people. But again, this requires sort of like, you don't have to say that these people are the enemy, but you have to treat them as opponents, as people who need to be like beaten, which is a thing that, the generation of Democrats who helped build the administrative state, the FDR generation, knew how to do, right? Like, they did not hesitate to treat Herbert Hoover as someone who needs to be like swept away to the ash heap of history.